Hello and welcome to KU Pathashala. I am Bhagya Rajeswari and I am a language instructor. Some books are remembered for the iconic beginnings it offers. For instance, take the case of Moby Dick. It starts thus: "Call me Ishmael." Or be it 1984, which begins thus: "It was a bright, cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Or be it Kafka's Metamorphosis, which begins thus: "As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from his uneasy dreams, he found transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect." Or be it Albert Camus' Outsider, which begins thus: "Mother died today," or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure. This is exactly my point. The iconic beginnings. That just grabs the reader's attention. Or as Ursula Guin, the famous American writer, puts it in a better way, she says that first sentences are doors to worlds. Today, we are also going to discuss one such book which is quite popular and which is well remembered for its iconic beginning. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. We are discussing Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And the tagline, if some of you would remember, says that this is the auto-ignition temperature, the temperature at which a book burns. So this 1953 dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451, is considered to be Bradbury's masterpiece work out of all the other works that he's written. Now, talking about his career, literary career, he was an American writer who grew up reading a lot. As a result, he's written across genres. You cannot classify Bradbury to just one genre. He might be popular for his dystopian novel, but he's written, extensively for science fiction. He's written for fantasy. He's written under adventure fiction genre. So you cannot just classify him into just one genre. And I think that's a crime that we usually do against authors by putting them into just one genre. People, most of the writers write extensively and they would like to write across genres. And he was one such writer. Now, he grew up reading a lot, and he was also somebody who started writing at a very young age. And it said that he used to write during the times of Great Depression and all the wars. He witnessed the Second World War. He used to write on butcher papers. Now, butcher paper is a paper that was used in meat shops, where they used to wrap the meat. It was this paper that was used to wrap the meat that was sold to the people. Now, when you say that he used to write in butcher papers, what I mean to say that it was also a time period where a lot of people, the scarcity of resources following the Great Depression, following the war, that is what we come to know about. But he grew up reading H.G. Wells, Edgar Allan Poe, Jules Verne, and all these science fiction, the writers that we all adore and admire a lot. So I'm not really surprised to know that he turned into science fiction and fantasy, and that he also became a master at it. So that's how his literary career started. That's the beginnings of his literary career. Growing up, he actually wanted to join military. He wanted to serve in the World War II, but unfortunately, because of his poor eyesight, he was rejected. So he never got to join the military and offer his service to the country. But I would say everything happens for a reason, because if he was not rejected by the military, we wouldn't get a fine writer like him. So everything happens for a reason. So this is all these things, but even when he tried to join the military, the passion for writing stayed with him. He continued to write, not always great stories, but short stories. He was greatly influenced by the science stories, especially the characters like adventures, the adventure fiction, where he had characters like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, because most of the stories he wrote later on were heavily influenced by these characters. So this inspiration probably stayed on till the end. Like even in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, you get to see this. So Bradbury continued to write out of his passion for writing, and after being inspired by a number of science fiction writings and adventure comic strips that he used to read, he continued to write. But it was a chance meeting with Christopher Isherwood, the very popular British writer, playwright, he's quite popular for his plays, that things changed for the good as far as Bradbury was concerned. And then, luck is always around the corner. You never know when it comes to you. So things change for the good for him. Now, if asked personally, and he's also said this at some point, that Bradbury personally doesn't like to be categorized under genres. So maybe he's turning in his grave as I am labeling him and carefully labeling and putting him under genres of fantasy fiction, adventure fiction, and all those things. He personally was against putting writers under genres because he believed that it's a very tight labeling. It's a restriction. And if we look at it in a different way, as readers also, genres would help us get into reading. It's that initial support that we should be taking, or we usually take in order to get into reading. But nothing more than that. As we become, as we transform into those serious readers, we realize the fragility of these genres. They just crumble down before us. You see that there is no book that is exclusively sci-fi or that is exclusively fantasy or anything. The genres get juxtaposed as we read, and we realize this. And there'll be crossovers, there'll be crossroads, and whatnot. Just like how our lives are all, right? So this is how Bradbury also viewed it. He even said that even science fiction is a depiction of the real. So how do you categorize it? It's not, how can you say that it's not a realistic novel? It is. Science fiction it's a depiction of what is happening around you. So Bradbury personally was against genres. Now talking about Ray Bradbury's this epic novel, this masterpiece work, Fahrenheit 451, the entire plot is built on the concept of book burning. Now, book burning, book bans, these are concepts, they are not novel concepts. All of us know about it. There are contemporary events of book burning and book bans, even today. So, book burnings have a history that dates back to the time, of the inception of the books itself. Right from the days we had books, we have book burnings and book bans also. We have a history of books that were banned, but later on went on to become classics. So it is exactly on this concept of book burning that Fahrenheit 451 is also built. So if you look at the history of book burnings, be it, we can go back to the book burnings of China, where even people who wrote books, writers were also equally burned along with the books. Be it the burning of the Alexandrian library in Egypt, be it the Nazi book burnings, or be it the Christian book burnings, we have it all. Because there is a certain fear in the mind of the authority, because book burnings is an authority's tool. It's a tool or a technique that's usually employed, that is usually taken up by an authority in order to impose order, sometimes to silence people, sometimes to stop independent thinking, sometimes to stop creative thinking, because they fear it. And words probably are the most powerful medium that we have. So that's exactly why book burnings are usually done. And that's exactly why we still have book burnings and book bans. Talking about book burning, the Harry Potter series, which is considered to be one of the most popular fantasy fiction or children's fiction, children's favorite globally, it went through 6 book burnings in the United States alone. It was blamed because some people thought that it actually encouraged black magic because it has wizards and wizards and witchcraft and wizardry. So it kind of encouraged black magic, and that influenced young people a lot. So citing this as a reason, Harry Potter copies were burned in the United States. All said and done, whatever justification you give for book burnings, I think we should understand it's an oppressor's method. It's a dictator's method. It is done to stop independent thinking and creativity. Talking about the plot of the story, as I mentioned earlier, the entire novel is set on the concept of book burning. But the story begins, and the story is set in a future American society where books are outlawed, and there are firemen, people who are employed as firemen to burn books, and those who have books, those who collect books. Basically, a society that's not at all conducive for people who love books, for bibliophiles. Can you imagine a society? So that thought itself puts a fear in your mind. That kind of scares you, where you are not allowed to read a book that you love. You're not allowed to buy a book that you love. You're not allowed to collect books, where you have to hide and read. So the amount of oppression, the amount of restrictions that is put on the right to live a life with, right to live a life freely is what scares you the most. So there are no ghosts, there are no terrifying scenes, there are no bad, premonitions or omens. Without all these, at the end of the novel, the reader is scared to death. Just because of the thought that, this could happen, where you are, where you're punished, where you're tortured, where you're burned alive just for reading a book. Because that's the power of words. That's something that we need to understand here. Because book burning always said this. Book burning always sent out the message that words are powerful. So this novel, Fahrenheit 451, is set in a future American society where books are outlawed and firemen, men who've been given the job to burn books, are there. And the protagonist, the central character in this novel his name is Guy Montag. He is also a fireman. But there is a difference. Now, here is a man who does a job that he doesn't like. He doesn't enjoy burning books. He doesn't know why he is doing it. And that's when he meets a very young girl called Clarissa. She's his neighbor. She's just a 17-year-old girl, a very liberated spirit, somebody who enjoys living, somebody who has a guts to question things around her. She has her own thoughts, somebody who loves to think independently. He meets her and he realizes, that just changes his personality, and he starts to rethink. He thinks, what is the purpose of his life? Why is he doing a job that he's been doing every day? What is the purpose of doing? What is the purpose of burning books after all? He, at the end of the day, is somebody who wants to take care of these books. He is somebody who wants to preserve these books. He is against censoring and burning the books. So why is he doing this? So these changes come over him. On the other side, on the other hand, there is another character called Mildred, who is Guy Montag's, Mr. Montag's wife. She has attempted suicide. So the connection between Mildred and Montag is very different. Mildred, and they do not share a very happy, he's not in a very happy married relationship. There is no communication happening between them. She is quite depressed. She is trying to take her own life. She's attempted multiple suicides, but and it's a very weird, a very strange sort of a life that they're leading. With the entry of Clarissa, this 17-year-old young girl who's so full of dreams in life, he realizes that there is something called a purpose of life, and what he's doing now is not what he exactly wants to do. So there begins the change. And at the same time, he's against burning books. After meeting Clarissa, he looks forward to the meetings he has with her, because he loves the conversations and discussions and the ideas that come out of the discussions with Clarissa. Now he kind of realizes that there could be a different purpose of life. There could be better things that he can do. Meanwhile, Mildred attempts suicide again, and he has to take her to the hospital, and something strange happens. Clarissa goes missing, and nobody is sure where she disappeared to. Equally important are the other characters in the novel. Like, meet Beatty. Beatty is his supervising officer, the fireman's, Montag's supervising officer, Beatty, or be it the mechanical hound. It's a robotic dog that helps the firemen in finding out houses where books are kept, where books are collected and hidden. It helps the firemen in finding out the places and people who reads books. Now, once it's found out, the firemen's job is easy. They go and burn the books as well as that person's house. They just burn everything down. There is a point in the novel which is quite depressing and quite alarming. A point where it's a usual day for the firemen. They find out, with the help of the mechanical hound, the robotic dog, that there is a woman who's living out there whose house is full of books. They find her out and they ask her to burn all the books, but she refuses to do that like any bibliophile would do. And but she's been forced, everything. But so she's forced to burn her books. So what she does is she burns herself alive along with the books in the house. Now, meanwhile, Montag steals a book from her collection and he keeps it with her. So it's a very strange point in the novel where you cannot feel, it's a very shocking picture of an image of a woman who refuses to come out of the house, instead chooses to burn herself, alive, instead chooses to give up her life along with the books she loves. But that's the kind of atrocity, that's a kind of torture, that's a kind of punishment that is also given to people who refuses to give up their books. So probably again, the focus falls on the power of how much power the books have, the words have on influencing people. Meanwhile, as I said, Montag steals a book which he keeps with him. So now he is that man, that's where the paradox begins. Here we have a fireman whose job is to burn books, but here we have a fireman who's also stealing books so that he can preserve them. So as the story progresses, I'm not going to the deeper details, but as the story progresses, he has his supervising officer has grows suspicious about Montag, and he just subtly hints at him that if you're hiding books, it will get burnt, and if you refuse to give it up, the entire house will burn down. So that's the point. That's exactly the point where Montag feels the heat of the moment, because he had been a fireman all his life. He had been going around burning books, even though without his, he never wanted to do that personally, but he had been doing that. But now he was also feeling threatened after having a conversation with Beatty. Now he understands what it is to be on the other side. And as the story progresses, he reveals it to Mildred, his wife, about the stolen books. Now she panics. She is shocked, and she doesn't understand the relevance of books. She is actually indifferent to books, and the only question that she wants to ask Montag is that what is the whole point of saving up and preserving books? So we have characters like this. It is not that we are living in they're showcasing a society where entirely of bibliophiles. It actually, the story throws light on different cross sections of the society, people who belong to different. It's not that everybody is rooting for the same cause. No, there are people who are indifferent to what is happening to the society, and on the other side we have people who are ready to give up their life for a reason, for a cause. So that is what the novel offers. That's where the window opens to, the window of the novel opens to. That makes you think about it. But as the story progresses, in the end, we find Montag escaping. His house is burned down. Beatty gets killed, and there is a point where Mildred and Montag has a conversation where he tries to explain to her what is causing depression to her. Why is he getting threatened these days? He's desperately trying to tell these people there is an alternative. We need to preserve these books because they have it has a key to a better future. But nobody listens to him. Nobody pays heed to whatever he was saying. So that's exactly what the novel is also trying to say. That's exactly my point. A dystopian fiction or a work of fiction is not depressing and disappointing. It actually gives you a fresh perspective. Montag desperately tries to offer that fresh perspective to his wife, who unfortunately doesn't get it. Finally, as the novel comes to a close, you find Montag with a group of book lovers, who are in exile. So here we have a society where you are allowed to stay in the society only if you agree to burn your books, only if you oblige, only if you obey, only if you submit yourself to the authority. If you refuse, either you get killed or you go in exile. So here also we have a group of people who are in, they're all book lovers who are in exile, and a group of people called drifters. Now these drifters are, they're all intellectuals. So what they do is extremely interesting. So this is another very interesting part in the book. Where these drifters, what they do is, they're also in the exile, they're running away from these firemen and this very opposing, very dictatorial kind of a regime. What they do is, they are learning an entire book by heart, by rote. They're just swallowing it up, they're memorizing the entire book. Each of them are doing it so that they might not be owning a book, they might not have a physical copy so that the firemen can find them out and burn it down. No, they will not find that physical copy to be burned. But these people, they are memorizing an entire book so that once they escape to a different place, there is still hope, to bring that out, because they have the ideas with them. Because it's very difficult to kill the ideas, right? You can kill people, but you can never touch their ideas. Ideas are very powerful. Same is the case with words. So this is what the drifters do, and this is exactly it's on a very hopeful, a very optimistic, ending to the story where Montag meets them, and Montag is relieved to meet these drifters who shows him way, who guides him, who tells him that no, there is a way out. There is a way out to pick up from where we have left. So that's how the novel ends here. So as the novel ends, the reader might be baffled at whatever they were reading. We have right from the beginning, it says it was a pleasure to burn. So the reader is thrown into the, in the middle of something very crucial. We know that something really, very crucial is happening. Something very indispensable is happening. And you realize that it is books are getting burned. And the reader is in for a surprise right at the outset. That is something really special about this novel. And from then onwards, the graphic images, the changes, the movements in the narration as the novel progresses, another interesting aspect of it. Not just that, it reminds you of a couple of other works, like for instance, how 1984 is described. In George Orwell's 1984, we have a similar character like Guy Montag. Here we have Guy Montag, who's a fireman who burns books but doesn't like what he's doing. Personally, he is against what he's doing. He's somebody who wants to preserve books. On the other hand, in 1984 also, George Orwell introduces a character similar to him, Winston Smith. He works at the Ministry of Truth, but paradoxically ironically, what he does is he has to revamp history every other day that suits, that complements the state's affairs and state's actions. And on the other hand, he also has to destroy the proof of anything that might raise a question against the authority. So these kinds of dystopian fiction, I might be repeating the point, but dystopian fiction is definitely the need of the hour. It is something that's very close to non-fiction. It tells you through a story how important it is not to remain indifferent to whatever is happening around us, how important it is to raise the right questions at the right time. It always offers a fresh perspective on what is happening around us. Now, most of the dystopian fiction that I just mentioned here, be it the 1984 by George Orwell, or be it Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit, or be it The Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, whichever, you name it, you understand that it's all set in a future. The settings are a future time. So that is their way of saying that this could happen if things are not set the right way right now. That's a way of telling. So I think a dystopian fiction has to be read in a different way. The mindset has to be different. It's not, I wouldn't say you will not enjoy it. The enjoyment is different because it stirs your thoughts. It encourages independent thinking. It just awakens you. And that's exactly what dystopian fiction is for. So thank you so much for listening all this while. I hope you all have a great time reading Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Thank you so much for listening.